Any good Peter Lynch stories from back in the day?
No, he is exactly what he appears to be. He's one of those guys that was nice and funny and laid back, and he had that premature gray hair. And he would get on calls, like there would be sales calls, and every now and then he'd kind of join, because obviously everybody wanted to know what Peter Lynch thought and everything. And all the quirkiness was true. The whole thing about, you get three, he had you have 3 minutes, and he put down the timer, and you have 3 minutes to do the deal. And he was just always thinking, and he would buy every stock in an industry. Like at one point he owned every public savings and loan in the country.
Wow.
And it was just unique how he could own 1,000 stocks in a bear market and still throw up 20% returns.
Right.
He was just like 24/7. That's all he did. He just thought about them. The whole thing about, in his book, which I would recommend, Went Up on Wall Street, the walk in the mall and all that back then, probably doesn't work as well today as it did back then.
Right.
He was exactly as people think that he was in person, which was great. Not everybody is.
So you have this 3-minute kind of time limit. Was that during like a pitch session for a stock, for example? That's how he.
Yep. Yeah, because one, he had so many stocks to pay attention to, but two, his premise was, if you can't tell me in 3 minutes, what the investment thesis is in a clear and concise way, clearly there isn't one, right?
Right.
And I think a lot of people like to be dazzled by 20 or 30 page in-depth, oh wow, this guy knows everything. Sometimes it's just as simple as they're number one in the industry, and here's how their margins are higher than everybody's, and it looks like that's going to continue for a while. I mean, I think sometimes people get too involved in complicated thinking, and that they think their edge is they know a company better than anybody else, and I don't think that's true.
Right.
Necessary.
It's funny because before our call today, I had a one-on-one Zoom meeting with one of our newest members at GeoInvesting. I do that a lot if they want to have a one-on-one with me to learn about the platform, what we do. And this subject came up about these reports, how long should they be, and how do you go about through, the research process. And we talked about my new product, my Cliff Note product, which I don't know you and I have talked about yet, Tim, but it's a very quick, kind of concise way of looking at a stock, getting it down on paper right away, and putting it on in your pipeline. And I know that, I was, Peter Lynch's book, Went Up on Wall Street, and I've talked about it a lot, was my first book I read. And the only book I read for many years. I just loved it so much. I didn't want to get, sidetracked. Mm-hmm. And I remember from my very early days, that's what I used to do. I used to do it, obviously, in a 3-ring binder on some paper, and I would just write down, a symbol, a few sentences, why I liked it, and then my tasks I had to do to know about it better. And I guess that comes from reading that Peter Lynch book, right? And now you mentioned it, I didn't realize it at that time, but of course that's what was going on there. And I actually think that helps you think about companies in a much different way. It forces you to really drill down, what are the most important parts of a company. And there's, I think, from a situation where you can find many reasons not to want to buy a company too. And I think that if you sometimes the further you dig, sometimes you find you talk yourself out of buying it because you find too many risks. I'm not saying that you shouldn't be aware of these risks, but I think that there's a way to really concisely opportunity, risks, caveats, valuation. You can kind of get a good sense pretty quickly once you're good at this game of getting that at least initial pipeline that you'll want to look at pretty quickly.
Two of his other famous sayings that turned out to be true I'm going to paraphrase both of them, but one of them is, if you spend 13 minutes on the macro, you've wasted 8 minutes of time. And now, and it seems like people focus way more now on the macro than ever before. And maybe that's necessary, but I think we'll talk down the road about why I think one of the ways I do my work kind of, I don't want to say neutralizes the risk of macro, but we'll talk about how I think about macro in individual companies.
Perfect.
But the other one that he said was, know what you own and know why you own it.
Right.
And to your point, you can describe why you own it, what you own and why you own it in a couple of sentences, or just a very basic outline. Because you're right, there's, you go through a risk section, there's probably let's take out the generic risk section, right? There may be 5 to 20 company specific risks, right? Financing, or if our president leaves or whatever, right? There's going to be a whole list. But I'm sure you do the same thing. After a while, you can go through the 20 and you're like, okay, well, these are really the only 3 risks.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. I need to focus on getting comfortable with those 3 risks. The other ones, every other company will have in some form or fashion. Right.
Right.
So
I know.
I think that we think similarly that way.